Kungliga Fysiografiska sällskapet i Lund sammanträder. Jag lämnar nu över ordet till förste vicepreses fru Gullberg. Varsågod.
Tack så mycket. And I will switch to English. It's my great honor and privilege to introduce this year's Sven Berggren Prize laureate, Professor Michael Tomasello. Michael Tomasello is Professor of Psychology at Duke University and a former director of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig. As a developmental and comparative psychologist, his groundbreaking and pioneering work with non-human and human primates has shed entirely new light on the origins of social cognition and possibly the foundations of what makes us human. Now, under normal circumstances, Professor Tomasello would, of course, have been with us to receive the insignia of the prize. But since this isn't possible, we're still delighted that we'll be able to take part of his inspiring lecture on precisely this topic tonight. Now, we're streaming the lecture, so our members of the Society, as well as the broader general public, can partake of this lecture. And I should alert all of you to the fact that if you would like to ask questions of Professor Tomasello, you can do so using the Mentimeter system, and the details of this should appear on the screen. So you type in your questions and you send them along, and I will then moderate the questions in the Q&A session after the lecture. Now, please join me in welcoming Professor Michael Tomasello.
Thank you very, very much. I'm extremely honored by this award. I've been in Lund back in the early 2000s to visit Peter Gardenfors and his research group and the speech sciences research group. It's a beautiful city, a beautiful university, and I'm extremely honored to be given this award. So thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen with you now, and hopefully that's okay. Please let me know if, technicians, please let me know if that's not working. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about today is the research that my colleagues and I have been doing over the last several decades, in which the general method is to compare human children to our nearest great ape relatives in experimental situations and see what we get. And on the basis of that, we have been able to construct at least a tentative theory about some of the differences that characterize what it is to be human, how we became human over evolutionary time, and how this plays out today in the ontogeny of children. So humans are great apes. We diverged from chimpanzees and bonobos about 4 to 6 million years ago. And the basic puzzle is, and we are as close to one another, to chimpanzees and bonobos, as lions are to tigers, horses are to zebras, rats are to mice. So that's how close we are genetically and in terms of evolutionary time. And yet, there's a puzzle. We humans have complex technologies and cities, and we have complex symbol systems, and including mathematics. We have complex social institutions like governments and universities. In a very short time, evolutionarily speaking, we have done all these things. And the general form of an answer for how this came about in a single word would be culture. That is, none of these things are things that human individuals have done on their own. These are all collective products of groups of humans cooperating with one another in one way or another. So the way to capture this is, one way to capture this is Boyd and Richardson's dual inheritance theory. That is to say, you can see down at the bottom here, there's a line of evolutionary time, and this is the evolution of the human species. But in addition, we have cultural histories in which there are things like social institutions and symbol systems and Arabic numerals and etc. And those are things that are evolving in the culture at the same time. And the individual, in their ontogeny, in their development, is inheriting both. Now, they're inheriting them in slightly different ways, that's true, but they're inheriting the genome of their species. They're inheriting the genetic capabilities of their species. But in addition, they're inheriting all the things their culture has created, various kinds of tools and symbols and ways of helping get things done, various practices and so forth. In the modern world, formal education and literacy and all of that. So the individual is inheriting both its genes from its culture and its species as a whole. It's inheriting things from its cultural group, and the individual is then coming to maturity in this context. An easy example is language. I have inherited the capacities of my species for acquiring a natural language. I was born into an English-speaking culture, and so people spoke English around me. And because I had my genetic capabilities, I was able to, in my individual ontogeny, to use my genes and my culture to learn a language. So it's all three of these time frames working together that you need to explain. Now, for ontogeny in particular, a very important fact is the following. This is the percentage of adult brain size as a function of age. So over human ontogeny, brain development is extremely slow. Now, importantly, this graph is neutralizing for the fact that human brains are 3 times larger than grade 8 brains, 3 times larger in adulthood. But this is just saying the percentage of adult size. So that's taken care of in the graph. And so if you are looking at the percentage of adult size, you can see that chimpanzees are 90% of adult brain size at age 2. If you look up from the 2, 90% of adult brain size. Human children only have about 50%, and they don't get to 90% of adult brain size until they're 8 years old. So if we go back to this dual inheritance, this ontogeny in humans has adapted to this situation of inheriting your culture and having to acquire it by a very slow ontogeny. Chimpanzees have to feed themselves from soon after they are weaned at around age 4. Whereas human children, if you have any adolescents at home, you know that they aren't feeding themselves. That is, they're not providing for themselves. And this is true in hunter-gatherer cultures as well. They're not bringing in enough food to support themselves until they're adolescents. So extremely slow brain growth, extremely slow progress to maturity where you can sustain yourself. So a long, highly socially dependent ontogeny. That is human ontogeny as distinct from that of other apes. And it's because this ontogenetic pattern, life history, is adapted for growing up in a cultural world where you need to acquire a lot of things to be a competent member of your culture. So the title of the lecture comes from my new book, 2019, Becoming Human. And in that book, I propose a theory of human ontogeny that is grounded in human evolution. And there are 2 steps that I think are part of our evolutionary heritage. They are maturationally determined, and they reflect 2 steps in human evolution. And the first one is what I call the 9-month revolution, where I call it joint intentionality, meaning that I can collaborate with someone and get things done that I couldn't get done on my own. And there was a period in human evolution, at least that's the hypothesis, where humans were collaborating with other individuals to, for example, collaboratively forage. Then at around 3 years old, we get a group mindedness, collective intentionality, which has to do with becoming a member of a group and really understanding yourself to be a member of a group. So you're going to know about the conventions of your group, the social norms in your group, and that's going to reflect a period in human evolution where culture emerged, mainly with modern humans. So these are the ontogenetic manifestations of the two key steps in human evolution that make humans different from other apes. There's a lot of other things going on in human evolution and human ontogeny, but these are the things that distinguish human children from great apes, especially in the when we're talking psychology and cognitive development, social development. In this book, I have 8 substantive chapters, 4 of them on social things, collaboration, prosociality, social norms, moral identity, and 4 of them on cognitive things, social cognition, communication, cultural learning, cooperative thinking. And all 8 of these developmental domains undergo a significant shift at around 9 months, the 9-month revolution, and another shift at around 3 years. So that's the overall theory, that there are 2 maturationally determined steps. And then in these different domains, they open up new possibilities of cultural learning for individuals. Now, I'm going to give you just a quick impression here of what happens at the 9-month revolution. And I'm going to compare 3 things that young children do, and I'm going to give you a video of chimps right afterwards, a chimp right afterwards. So starting on the left there, that's me with my daughter when she was exactly 9 months to the day, 9 months old. I'm going to get a little overexcited here. I apologize, but because I wanted to see, well, let's see, can she do some kind of collaborative joint attention, joint intentionality things at around 9 months? Now, I want you to watch where she looks. We're going to be rolling a ball back and forth. And watch, she's going to roll it back. Well, try to anyway. And I'm very excited. And she's looking at me in the eyes. And now she gets it and she's going to roll it back. And then she looks to me. She looks to see my reaction. Okay. And now she's going to roll it back again. Right. And there's the look. Okay. I've worked with chimpanzees for close to 30 years now, and I can tell you a chimpanzee, not only will they not roll the ball back and forth, but they certainly wouldn't, even if they did find the ball interesting. You're going to see a chimp in a minute. They wouldn't be monitoring what my reaction was. So it's a triadic interaction, you, me, and the ball, and the game of rolling back and forth, and the attention is being shifted there so that we can share the experience. The second one is going to happen very quick, the one at the bottom. And this is communication that happens at around this age. And you're going to see very quickly, okay, what is the motivation there? All the child is doing is holding this up and saying, oh, look, isn't this cool? And the adult is saying, yes, okay, great, that's cool. Again, chimpanzee, you would never see this, and you're going to see an example in just a minute. And now finally, let's look at the classic book reading where mom is going to be, got the book and going to be pointing and they're going to be sharing attention to the book. And again, the child is going to turn around and look at mom's face. Again, this is my child with my wife. There we go. See, we're sharing. She has to look back and check. And you're going to see her in a minute get excited at the sibling behind the camera. There. Okay. Okay. All right, so in all 3 of these, we're sharing our experience. And this doesn't mean that we're connecting face to face. We're attachment, we love each other. Chimps can love each other fine. We are sharing attention to some third thing. So you picture a triangle. Now here's a chimp. This lasts about a minute, and I'm just going to let it run and talk over it. This is a chimp with a caretaker raised by humans. Got a lot of the same toys. And you'll see the book and whatnot. And it's going to start with the ball, and she's going to try to get him. I'm going to turn that sound off. It's not necessary. See, she's telling him what to put the ball, and now she's going to ask for the ball in just a minute. She's going to ask for the ball, but he won't give it to her. She wants to play with it. She's starting to play. All right. And now the chimp is interested in the ball, but only to play by herself. And now she's going to play with it in the thing by herself. Right, so she's interested in playing with it, but she's not interested in sharing the play or sharing experience. She's having fun on her own. Okay, now there was a little cut there because I want to show you a book reading scenario. The chimp is interested in the book. They're interesting pictures. The caretaker is pointing the same way that the child's mother did. And the chimp is interested. But the chimp is not turning around and looking. There's nothing that you would call sharing. The child pointed to the book on one occasion. The chimp's not going to point. The chimp is now going to take the book herself. Oh, sorry, she's going to do something else, but right, she's going to play with these. So she doesn't hold it up to show it. Now she gets the book herself. She's interested, but again, she's not going to point or show or share or anything along those lines. So you can see she's in her own world. She's very interested. She's very intelligent. And she can definitely relate to the caretaker face to face, but they're not sharing experience about external things. So here's a kind of a schematic of what I call the shared intentionality schema, or the dual level structure, that humans are operating when they engage in the way that you just saw, with a joint goal. Look at the blue part here, a joint goal. And when we're rolling the ball back and forth, we have a joint goal of playing this game, and you have your role and I have my role. So you roll it and I catch it. Then I roll it and you catch it. So we have a joint goal and we each have our own role. At the same time, if we think of it more cognitively and less behaviorally, we have joint attention around this. We both are sharing attention. So the child is looking up when she's rolling it back and forth. How did you see that? Children, it happens in children more or less at around 9 months of age, across all cultures, across individuals. They're big, large-scale studies, and it's like clockwork. It's like, you know, social smiling or something that you can see in human infants at 6 weeks of age. At around 9 months of age, they start doing this triadic checking, joint attention, collaboration kind of thing across cultures, across individuals. So it seems to have a very strong maturational component to it. And so that's the proposal about what happens at 9 months. And now what I want to do is show you some of the domains that I mentioned that I cover in the book, and just show you again some films, because I think all of these films have studies behind them. The citations are down at the bottom. Some of them are observational studies, but most of them are experimental studies with control conditions and so forth. And I'm happy to send reprints or give the full reference to anyone who's interested. They're all in the book. So let's look at communication. Now, chimpanzees do something, and great apes in general, that other primates and mammals don't do. And this is a very flexible gestural communication. A lot of mammals and primates vocalize, but their vocalizations are very kind of hardwired. The gestures, you will see, look much more deliberate, intentional, but let me watch this. She wants to go on a walk. She wants to walk. She doesn't want to walk without mom. So she kind of that, okay? And then she goes on a walk, okay? Very deliberate, has a very, to me anyway, has a very intentional feel to it. She knows what she wants. She's trying to get mom to join her. But again, all of their gestures, and I've been studying chimpanzee gestures. This is the first thing I studied with chimpanzees. I've been studying this for 25 years now. All of them have two characteristics. Number one, they are imperative. The child wants something. So it's like, do this. And the other thing is they are just about you and me and what we're doing. So it's about play, it's about fighting, it's about nursing, it's about sex. In this case, it's about taking a walk, but it's not this triangle, this triad. It's not you and me sharing attention to some third thing. Okay, so here is where we get what children at, this is a child around 14 months or something like that. And this is the classic pointing gesture. And again, this is not a demand. This is not an imperative. This is just sharing attention. So here you go, it happens fairly quick. Okay, the father doesn't think she wants something. She doesn't want him to fetch it or anything like that. It's just, look, isn't that cool? And children do that at this age all the time. If a bird flies past, they might go, oh, look. And again, pointing is like clockwork. Well, it's not quite like clockwork. There's a several-month window, but almost all children in all cultures, and we have studied this cross-culturally, will point at somewhere between about 11 and 16, 17 months of age. All right, and this is the one I showed you before. I just like this one again so you can see it again, because this one, it's so clear. This is not imperative. This is just, isn't this cool? She doesn't want, the little boy doesn't want his dad to take it, to do anything with it. It's just showing. And so this is sort of pure sharing experience. The goal, the child's goal, is to share experience. There's no other goal. It's not to get the toy, to get him to work it, nothing. The goal is to share experience. And this is not just a childlike thing. If you translate this to adults, I would say this is basically the forerunner of adult gossip, where we just say, oh, you know, did you hear what happened yesterday? Did you hear, you know, who got divorced or who's dating who or whatever? This kind of where we're just sharing, just to share. I learned something interesting. I just want to share it with you. There's a new interesting movie on. Have you seen it? I don't care if you go to the movie or not. I just think you'll be interested in that. So I'm sharing it with you. So this sharing of experience and sharing of is unique to humans, I would say. Not just pointing, another type of gesture that gets you there. And by Peter Gardenfors has studied both pointing and iconic gestures. Iconic gestures are also used not just imperatively, but also just to share. And this is a child who is helping, it's a puppet. The child knows how to operate this toy, and the puppet does not know how to operate it and is going to be struggling. You don't really see the puppet. We have the little plexiglass barrier there, so the child won't actually go over and physically help. We're trying to encourage communication. And so you see this little girl tell the puppet what to do. Show, I should say, show. Push it here, push it like that. So she's showing him what to do with a gesture. Okay, and this is demonstrating for you in my behavior what you should be doing in your behavior. So it's an iconic gesture. You're supposed to map your body onto my body. No other species on the planet does iconic gestures. No other species on the planet does pointing like humans do. And it's all about this coordinating our activities for collaboration and sharing experience as part of that. So let's get to collaboration then. And I do think I have a whole book, a 2008 book on the origins of human communication. That's what you just saw, that kind of sharing of experience triadically, you and me talking about some external thing. The evolutionary context for that was collaboration. So you and I are trying to get something done together. We're foraging together. We're doing some activity together. And I say, oh, you know, there's something over there that will be interesting to you to help you do your job. And that way, I'm helping you to play your role in the collaboration. And that helps me because we have a joint goal and we're going to be successful or fail together. And so it's in my interest to help you play your role. So, so here's a little, this shows you how they go together. This is a little collaboration task. And the child has seen that this tube comes apart and there's a toy inside. And she's going to work it with this, with the Felix Warneken. And he's going to be difficult on purpose. And you're going to see what happens when they're trying to coordinate to get this job done together. And he's difficult. All right, he's not doing his job. He pushes it toward him, pushes it. He's 18 months, by the way, pushes it, and then do your job. Okay, you have to pull, okay? And the kid is showing him where you should do it. Now, you might say, oh, this is imperative. He's telling him, I glossed it as do your job. But basically, the kid is not really telling him what to do. She's saying, look, pull on there. That's the way you need to do it to get this done, right? And so, sorry, I forgot. I have to re-engage it this other way here. And you'll see he's being difficult, and then he pushes it toward him again, tells him how to do it. Look, there. And then he's actually pausing for 15 seconds. It's experimentally controlled. And then he starts back again, irrespective of what the child does. And they move apart and they're successful. Now, this is a different task with the chimpanzee. I couldn't show you the tube because we couldn't do the tube with the chimpanzees because they would just grab one end with their feet and the other end with their hands, and they would pull it apart on their own. So they didn't really like collaborating on that. But this one, you can see here that there's a door that the chimp has to pull up. And then the human who's collaborating with her, this is again, this human race chimp that you saw earlier, Annette, and then she'll reach through and get the food and they'll share it. But when the door's down, it's blocked. But the key is she's gonna, just like in that last study with the child, she's gonna just stop doing her part for 15 seconds in the middle. And you'll see that the chimp does nothing to try to re-engage her. Okay, she's frustrated that the human wasn't reaching when she had the door up. But now, instead of trying to encourage her, you can see she's a little more active than your normal child. Instead of trying to encourage her or re-engage her or pointing and telling her what to do, she's pushing her out of the way and seeing if she can do the other role by herself. Now the 15 seconds is up. The human is showing that she's ready, and okay, they were successful. All right, so they were successful, but the chimp was not engaged with the human in the same way. When the human wasn't playing her role, she wasn't telling her what to do, she wasn't communicating or showing her how to do it. Now, you might say, oh, but this is a chimp working with a human. This is not their normal thing. Their normal thing would be with another chimp. Well, when they do it with another chimp, they hardly ever are successful. And if they are accidentally, the one who gets the food eats it and doesn't share it. And so neither one of them will open the door, because opening the door is being, you'll be taken advantage of. You'll open the door and the other guy will get all the food. So that's another important dimension of humans' adaptation for cooperation and shared intentionality is that you have to relate to your partner in certain ways. You have to treat your partner fairly or they won't interact with you anymore. So when these two chimps are doing this together, again, they have trouble coordinating, but if they're lucky and they do work at the same time where one lifts the door and the other gets the food, they don't share it. And so their relationship is, as a collaborators, is gone. So now you'll see that here. This is an experiment where this has a voiceover. It was done for a TV show. And you will see that chimps are gonna work together. So I told you they could work together just a little bit. And they got a little bit of training on this, but not a whole lot, but a little bit. And the key is that this rope that you see goes through these pegs here. And if you pull just by yourself, the rope comes out. You have to wait for your partner so you can pull together, right? And they had a little bit of experience with this and learned it. And the experiment here, actually for the TV thing, they put two experiments together, but he's going to come in, one of the chimps is going to come in, and I should say she because they're both females. She's going to come in and she's going to be ready, but she sees that her partner is not there. And she actually goes and opens the door for her partner, which I was completely surprised. But it shows that they really know that they need their partner. But then what I want to focus on is the sharing of the food afterwards and whether they can get this going over many trials. So we're ready to do this time and time again, right? So here it comes.
So what will the chimpanzee do?
Right, she knows not to pull, that it's going to be fruitless to pull.
He can't do it on his own and removes the peg.
And she opens the door for her partner and they pull in.
They pull the rope together. In this situation, the chimpanzees help each other.
Okay, now the tricky part comes now. Okay, they do this, but that's because they each have their own food on their own end of the board. Now we're going to put the food in this middle thing, where now the issue of sharing becomes crucial. All right, and you'll see what happens then. So now the food is in the middle.
Still help each other as humans would. hold the rope, and one of them pulls the blanket.
So she was very unenthusiastic because she knew what was going to happen.
But the dominant chimpanzee grabs all the food.
Okay, so you can imagine what happens on the next trial. We set it up again, and the subordinate chimp quits. The subordinate chimp won't engage. So the dominant chimp has succeeded in getting the food on one trial, but they cannot get an evolutionarily stable strategy, as it's called. They can't get a stable strategy going across trials because they're not built to share the spoils fairly. They are built for dominance. That's all the great apes are built for. One individual, when there's a question over food, the dominant individual just takes it. If anybody wants to ask me a question about bonobos at the end, I'm happy to address that. Bonobos are a little bit more cooperative, but I will just say now that they're a little bit more cooperative, but they're still, when the chips are down, they'll be dominant if they need to be. Now here's human children in a similar task. They have 4 Gummibärchen here, 4 gummy bears, and they have a similar thing where they pull with the rope. They learn how this works just a little bit themselves, but the issue is going to be about the sharing. That's what I want to focus on here. These are 2 3-year-old little boys, German speaking. All right. And I chose this one because this little boy acts like the first chimp, the dominant chimp. He goes over and starts, but notice he doesn't take them all. He only takes 1, actually. This little boy notices that he doesn't have any on this side, meaning I don't have any on my side, comes to the middle, starts to take all 3 of them. The little boy says, no. So then he just takes 2 and leaves 2 for the other little boy. Okay, and they can do this all day long, okay? They have a way of working it out. It's not that they share fairly almost all the time, 2 and 2. Sometimes they don't, but even so, they still have trust that on the next trial they can do it, right? And we even made it more difficult where we played a trick on them so that they were collaborating, and then the rewards came out unfairly, and you can watch what they did. Watch, he's pulling. These are marbles. Whoops, 3 to one side and 1 to the other side. They really want these marbles. And he shares it with them, so they have 2 and 2. Okay? There's a control condition for this experiment where they come in together. They come in together, and the marbles are already separated, 3 on one side and 1 on the other, and they don't share. So the title of this paper is actually that collaboration facilitates equal sharing in children, but not chimpanzees. So chimpanzees don't share so much anyway, but nevertheless, we concocted an experimental situation where the chimps pulled together or not, and then I got 2, you got 1, and there was 1 in the middle that I could prevent you from grabbing, or I could let you have it. And they did, they let them have it sometimes and not other times. But the key finding for this experiment was it didn't matter whether they had been collaborating or not. So the collaboration did not encourage more equal sharing than the non-collaboration. And in the children, the collaboration encouraged equal sharing in a way that non-collaboration did not. So you can see now that collaboration is the home of this special kind of communication, this sharing experience type communication, and collaboration is the home to sharing fairly and treating your partner fairly. Obviously, a critical part, a key dimension of human culture is social or cultural learning that children engage in. So I actually like to think of 2 dimensions of culture. One of them is coordinating with others, and that's what you've seen there. Collaborating, communicating, that's about coordinating our activities in the moment. But social cultural learning is coming from where adults show children stuff. And one of the things that is, one of the behaviors that is unique to humans is teaching. So this is just, there's no sound here, and this is not, the verbal is not important. This is a very little child, and the adult is going to teach her how to turn on this light. The white thing down here is a light that turns on, and she's going to show her how to do it by pressing the ball on there. Notice the natural, normal way would be just press it with your hand. But she shows her that you use the ball, and the child uses the ball. All right? So she does it the exact way that the adult does it, because that's the way the adult showed her how to do it. So she's very sensitive to the teaching and does it the same way. And now just we had other control conditions, but just so you can see, she's going to get her attention. Now she's going to do it a different way. She's going to do it with her wrist and not with the ball. And the child does it with the wrist. So again, this is an 18-month-old, and apes can engage in some social learning. I've had some back and forth with people like Andy Whiten over the years, and they can engage in social learning of various kinds. But you'll never see a chimp do that, ever. They won't copy the exact kind of behavior that the other person does. We have a comparative experiment, and focus on this down here. I lost my cursor. The big black square. The chimps and children are run separately, but both of them experience the same thing. The subject, the child or the chimp, is successful in one hole, and they put a ball in the hole and a reward comes out. So they're successful several times. Then they're watching while others, either chimps in the case of chimps or children in the case of children, are successful 3 times in another hole. So they put 3 balls in another hole and get a reward. And now it's their turn again. So they themselves have been successful on the one on the left, and they've watched others being successful on the one on the right. And the title of this paper was Children Conform to the Behavior of Others, Chimpanzees Stick with What They Know. So the chimps, if they've been successful, that's it. They don't pay attention to what anybody else is doing. And they don't ever do what the other one does, almost never. There are almost no examples. The children, over half the time, they would abandon what they know works and do what the other one did because they saw it worked for them. So children are just set differently to pay attention to and to follow what others are doing, and especially if, like in this situation, they're teaching. Gerge and Chibra have shown that when children know when someone is teaching them, and they take it especially seriously when someone is teaching them. But here they conform not even with teaching. And now you're going to see the extent to which children will go to do things exactly the way adults do them. So she's carrying rice over to the bucket, and you notice she put her hands over her head and did this. Now it's the child's turn. She does that, totally useless, has nothing to do with anything, but that's what the adult did. This is called over-imitation by Derek Lyons and others. This is the way we do it. This is the normative way that we do it. So they see adults doing it. There are a number of different interpretations of over-imitation. My former colleague, Hannes Riccocci, thinks that it's a normative interpretation, that the child is saying, if they see the adult do it this way, this is the way it's done. This is the way you do it. And again, chimps do not engage in over-imitation, as you might guess. Thinking. I'm going to show you a little video here of what I would consider something like thinking. I have a book on the evolution of human thinking, and there I argue that chimpanzees and other great apes do think. They think in a motor kind of way, and they think about how figure out, solve problems. So here's a problem where there is a place where you need to use a tool in the next room. And now they're going to come in here, and they are going to see these 3 possible tools that might possibly work in that other apparatus in the other room. They cannot see the other apparatus. So they have to keep the problem in mind and choose the right tool for it. And this is an orangutan. This is a study by my colleague Joseph Call. And you will see how they test to see which one might work. Not that one, not that one, not that one. Okay? And now it goes over to the other thing. So it needs to be long enough and it needs to be stiff enough. Okay? And she couldn't see it at the time she was choosing, but she knew what the problem was. So I would call that thinking. She keeps the problem represented in her mind, and she goes and finds the right tool to solve that problem. Now, children do all those kinds of things, and I'm just going to show you cooperative thinking. Now, cooperative thinking is not so easy to catch on a video, but here are two children who are trying to solve this problem. They have different information, and I just want to show you that they're actually arguing. They actually have different information about this. The experiment was not about cooperative thinking. But notice how they're working together. They want to... Okay? Okay. So they are figuring out how to do this together. And this is actually a good transition to my next topic, because they take this, the adult, each of them learns slightly different rules. That's why the conflict, that's what we were studying. But they both think there's a right way to do it. And the right way to do it is what they learn from the adults. And so it turns out that not only do we sort of work together with others in various ways, but we want to do things the right way. We don't want to just do things where we collaborate with others and are effective. We want to do it the right way. And so here's a case where children are concerned with their reputation. This little girl needs another sticker. Across there, there's some other stickers that belong to another child, she's been told. And she needs a big one, and she's thinking about getting it, but there's somebody watching her. And so she doesn't take it because she's being watched. So this experiment was about if children behave differently when they're being watched by a peer. And sure enough, they care if someone is watching them. All right. So chimpanzees don't care. We have a study with chimps, a similar situation. They can either share or they can steal. And children share more when they're being watched and steal less. And chimpanzees do the same no matter what. And that's crucial to social norms, because social norms are about doing things the right way when someone is watching. So here, a puppet is going to do something, and the child is going to enforce. The child has learned the rules, and the puppet is playing the game the wrong way. Right?
Ich werde nochmal dachsen. Achtung, ich werde nochmal dachsen. Oh, der Schuh.
Der hat geschummelt. Der hat geschummelt, dieser Elefant.
Darf ich jetzt nochmal dachsen?
Ja.
Darf ich dachsen?
Der Elefant hat geschummelt.
Ist die gut dran, ne? Ich schreibe mir schnell was auf und ihr macht dabei weiter.
Weißt du, der Elefant hat geschummelt.
Okay, so what's important here is this is not really collaboration. The child is watching from a third-party perspective. It's not ruining the game for the child. The child's not even playing. The puppet is playing, but he's doing it wrong, falsch, right? So this is now the level of culture where before a lot of the things I showed you were collaboration, joint intentionality. This is collective intentionality. Social norms are the collective expectations of the entire group for individual behavior. And so the child is enforcing those from a third-party perspective. They have adopted those norms, and everyone needs to do it the right way. So this notion of right and wrong is really about 3 years old. So finally, let me just conclude with, I know we have a wide range of expertise and scholars that are watching today. And some people who are not psychologists often think that behavior and cognition are kind of hard to touch, kind of hard to see. But I want to point out a very interesting fact. There are over 200 species of great apes, over 200 species of primates. And all of them have eyes that look like the chimpanzees there. That is, they're pretty much dark when you look straight ahead. And if they look to the side, you can see a little bit of white sclera. But humans of all cultures have whites of the eyes, white sclera, like you see there, that's over 3 times larger than that of apes. Now, what could be the possible reason for this? And by the way, there are almost no exceptions. There's almost no variability. So that means this has been selected in evolution quite strongly, because there's not variability and there are not exceptions. There are not even syndromes where people have some disease and don't have whites of the eyes. They almost all have whites of the eyes. And what we showed in our study, someone else documented this, and what we showed in our study was that when you look somewhere, chimpanzees follow the head and children follow the eyes. So we did an experiment where we looked up with our eyes closed and chimpanzees followed. We looked up with our eyes, keeping our head straight ahead, and the chimps don't look when it's just your eyes. And children do the opposite. If you close your eyes and look up, they don't look because you can't see anything. But if you look with only your eyes, they look up. So chimpanzees follow the head, children follow the eyes. So we think that having cooperative eyes evolved in a context where that was cooperative, because chimpanzees don't want you to see where they're looking, because you might get to the food first or escape the predator first or get the mate first. But humans have evolved in a context where others are not exploiting you all the time. They're cooperating. And so it's important that they can follow your gaze direction, follow your eyes. So we think this is a physical marker of evolving in a more cooperative social context. So to conclude, I'll try to conclude very as simply as I can. Human children are adapted for cooperation and culture. Cooperation being step 1, joint intentionality. Culture being step 2, collective intentionality, in ways that other great apes are not. And these adaptations are fundamental to uniquely human processes of cognition, communication, cooperation, and even morality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that really interesting and inspirational lecture. Now we have a little bit of time for some questions. I am going to monitor whether we have questions coming in online, but perhaps we can start off with a question from the people in the audience here. And if not, we actually have a question from Peter Jardenfors.
Peter, how are you? Nice to...
He's not in the room. He's not in the room. He's online.
Oh, okay.
But his question is this. Could you say something about how collective intentionality influences human in-group, out-group behavior compared to that of chimps?
Yes, okay. This is a really interesting question. Chimpanzees live in groups, and they do not like strangers in neighboring groups. So they will attack any stranger who comes on their territory, and they patrol their borders. So they definitely know who's in their group and who's not. But they know that because they are familiar with all the individuals in their group. They know each of them, and they attack any stranger, anyone that they're not familiar with. So their group is based on familiarity. Humans groups are based not only on familiarity, but cultural groups. We don't know everyone in our group. A lot of people have made a big theoretical importance about cultural groups. You have in-group strangers. Now, how do I know they're in my group? They look like a stranger. Well, they talk like me, they dress like me, they like the same foods I like. And so I can tell that we're all and they speak the same language, which is of course critical. And so I know they're in my group, even though I don't know them personally. The people from other groups, I don't really trust them very much. I don't know them. You know, they're across on the other side of the river there. They dress funny. They talk funny. I can't even communicate with them. So we build up in our culture conventions of language, social norms of behavior, what to eat, how to dress, and so forth. And if you're in our group, you behave in this way, and I'm loyal to you, and I support you, and I make sure you follow the social norms. And if you're outside of the group, I don't really care one way or the other. It's not, a lot of the research with children has shown it's not out-group bias or hatred that's the fundamental process. The fundamental process is in-group favoritism. That if the more you're like me, the more I favor you, and I just don't pay attention or don't care about the out-group. So yes, collective intentionality is the cultural common ground, social norms are all key to our sense of what group we're in. It goes back to the sharing experience again. And with chimps, it's just based on whether they're familiar to you or not.
Right, thank you. We have a question here.
So, Matthias Olsson here. So all the comparisons here were on chimps, but are there other species or animals where you can find some kind of intelligent behavior that look more like that are comparable to humans in some way or another?
Yes, there are a few things. Some of you may know there's some interesting research with domestic dogs. Now, because when I used to give the talk, and humans, people say, but my dog does it, you know, okay, but so I think that's in a lot of ways the most interesting exception. But dogs, of course, have been genetically selected to interact with humans. So dogs don't do any of these things with other dogs. This is a key fact. Dogs are doing these things with humans. So for example, when you point somewhere, dogs will follow your point. Sometimes, some dogs. And chimps won't even do that. So, but they don't do it with other dogs. So that's one thing. There are a couple of things. I mean, lions sort of do something that some people have called teaching their offspring. They bring them half-dead mice, and they keep doing it until the cub is able to kill it and eat it by himself. So, but they don't teach them in any other domain. So there are a few things here and there. There's some social learning and imitation. People have some observations of whales doing some interesting social learning things. Parrots are, of course, good imitators vocally. So I would say there are various species who have evolved one little piece or one little, you know, for a specific function, but, you know, nothing like across the board in a flexible way that humans do it.
Thank you.
I think we have room for one final question. We have a question online, which is the following. What about language? Could you say something about the role of imitation for language?
Well, you know, I started my career studying language, and so I know there are probably some people who know my language work more than this other stuff. But basically, what I started doing was I started with language, and then kind of as a sidelight, I was studying the communication of chimpanzees. And I started thinking, well, wait a minute, you know, not only are the chimps not using language, they're not even pointing, they're not even showing, they're not even doing these kinds of things. And so then I studied children's pointing and their iconic gestures, trying to get down below the conventions of a language. And so I actually started with language and just started digging deeper and deeper into collaboration and communication and culture. I think one time I said something like, if you're comparing chimps to humans, obviously language is a huge, huge difference that accounts for a lot of things in humans. But it's like saying chimps don't build skyscrapers. Humans have skyscrapers and chimps don't have skyscrapers, when chimps don't even build little huts. They don't even build straw huts. So yes, language is a huge difference, and language is the medium of many of the things in culture. It's kind of hard to imagine having social norms without language. It's hard to imagine a lot of teaching without, you can do some teaching without language, but there's certain types of teaching that you can't do without language. A lot of our sharing and bonding that goes on in language. So language is absolutely central to the whole process. And I guess I you know, had a reputation earlier in my career about being a non-nativist about language, and that's because there's 6,000 different languages in the world. So the child is learning their particular language. And I always say acquiring a language, not acquiring language. But still, humans are evolutionarily adapted for acquiring a language. They don't have a generative grammar. They don't have any of the structures that Chomsky thinks they have, but they are, the commonalities among languages are not due to a universal grammar. They're due to commonalities in human cognition, human communication, human social interaction, and I've written about that in some places. So there are universals of language, and humans are adapted for acquiring a language, but the actual process of becoming competent with a language is totally cultural. It's totally based on your imitation and social learning. In my book on language acquisition, I say intention reading and pattern finding. So children are seeing the language around them, they're reading others' intentions, why they're using this language, how they're referring to things with the language in this triadic way, and they're finding patterns, which constitutes the grammar of their particular language. So language is absolutely key, but I was trying to focus here on the most basic things that distinguish humans from chimps. And I think a lot of these things, like, you know, they're not only are they not using language, they're not even pointing and using iconic gestures.
Excellent. I think we've reached the end, so please join me in thanking Professor Michael Tomasello for a fabulous lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we will now release you and switch over to the rest of the proceedings in Swedish. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it a lot.
Ja, då ska vi gå över till nästa del utav det här mötet, och det är att välkomna våra nya ledamöter. Så att vi ber var och en komma fram, och så får ni då ett kuvert där det står någonting hemligt i kanske. Och så en liten nål. Ja.
Ja, nu ropar jag upp i tur och ordning här, och vi börjar med Daniel Strand. Nästa är Lisa Rydén. Ja, jo. Thomas Randrup. Mattias Olsson. Andreas Norman. Mats Eriksson. Ove Edfors. Ingvar Kärnefelt. Christian Balkenius. Det var det hela.
Ja, då var detta sammanträde, eller denna sammankomst, slut för ikväll. Och nu ska vi fortsätta på ett annat ställe här på Grand Hotel i Lund. Tack.
Och det stället är 2 våningar upp. Det är nämligen nu intaget supé i Bromansalen. Välkomna upp, varsågoda.